be here and be back with you again on a Sunday morning, which I know is nighttime for a lot of you. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We've been talking quite a bit on the cycles, and I took two major cycles that I thought, I'll be just a second here, that I thought would really help you understand yourself, and that was the cycle of the book of Revelations. And forgive me, I got a little bit of a cold today, but that was the cycle on the book of Revelations. And the six things, starting out with the candles, and out of the candles came the seals, the trumpets, the thunders, the plagues, and the regeneration. And that is going on inside of us every single day. And that rotation is inside of us every single day. And we went through that whole cycle. If you want to look back a couple of fellowships back, one of those sessions we took a whole message on it. And then the second cycle we talked about was also out of the book of Revelations, and it was the resurrection cycle, and how that you go from resurrection to a body change to a rapture or a catching away, into a wedding supper and tribulation period, then millennial reign, a white throne judgment, and out into new heaven, new earth. And we showed how that cycle is wrapped around each one of you, and it's going on simultaneous on the inside every day. The candle cycle moves through you and works you to understand the complete book of Revelation, but not only that, but understanding yourself. And then the resurrection cycle moves through you every day, renewing you, waking you up to something new, taking you through another issue. So those two cycles are working simultaneous inside of you. And I wanted to take another cycle today. I know we're on cycles, so I thought I would do this and help you to understand it's not really cycles as much as it is these are going to be influences on the cycles that are going on in you. The revelation cycle and the resurrection cycle. And these are going to be influences on you that will make your character, make up your temperaments, make up everything about you. It will help influence those things and make you the person that you are while you're going through those cycles. So I hope it's a blessing to you, but I wrote some things down that I want to go through, and I put some of it out on Facebook last night. But it says that Hippocrates, he, of course, was back before Christ, and he made the statement, it is more important to know what sort of person has a disease than to know what sort of disease a person has. And I thought that was very true, because a person's character and the things that they are, the things they do, the things they say, the things they practice, the things that become habit forming, many times brings out a disease in them. So you better understand the person and why the disease is there, if you know the person, rather than trying to figure out what the disease is. So, same way with us. Get to know the person, get to know the personality, get to know who you're talking with, who you're fellowshipping with, the things that you're doing, and it'll be easier to understand when issues come up in a person's life, why they come up and what is going on. The second thing was, and I'm talking about personalities today, and how that they shape and influence these cycles going on in us. Our attempts to reshape others may produce change, but the change is distorted rather than transformation. And this is David Kersey that makes that statement. He's the one, I don't know if you've read the book or not, Please Understand Me is the name of the book. David Kersey and Bates wrote the book. And just an excellent book. If you don't have it, I think you can look it up on the internet too. But it's just an amazing book on understanding one another. So he says, our attempts to reshape others may produce change, but the change is distortion rather than transformation. Now I put a comment there that says, when I was growing up, we had a lot of chickens on a farm. Observing the little chick pecking away at the eggshell is amazing. I can remember watching it. However, when you decide to reach in and get involved and help break away the shell for it, that chick will die. It needs the chaos of transformation to survive. And many times we reach in when someone is coming to a transformation, or they even catch an understanding from you. Then for some reason we always want to reach our hand in and start pulling the shell back and pulling the shell back. And once they catch the understanding, once they catch something that is not going to let them go, just watch, observe, be amazed at the things that are happening with them. And instead of trying to break them through the shell and trying to make them see everything you see, let them see what they see. And they will continue to develop and have a correct transformation. Then he said, Don Lowry said, when you know what your core values and needs are and feel good about them, you can perform at your highest potential in every area. Knowing what your core values are and feeling good about them. A lot of people don't know what their core values are and don't feel that good about themselves. Other people know what their core values are and feel good and are working at their highest level, and others have developed values, but it's never really been their core values of what they see, and therefore what happens is their whole life has a distorted feeling about it, and there's a lot of depression and ups and downs and everything else. So know what your core values are. Know what you're worth. That's what this is all about. So I put a comment down. Just one way to keep it quiet.
Exactly.
I put a comment down saying, know yourself, knowing yourself is the greatest knowledge that you will ever experience. To search out anything else without knowing yourself is vain intellect at best. That's all it is. You can know a lot of things, but until you know yourself, you're just playing with intellectual knowledge. Know and feel good about yourself, and your other adventures will be amazing. They will match up, your core values will come in, all those things will happen for you. And I think I posted this on Facebook, talking about personalities and things that influence those two cycles that I brought to you over the last few weeks. The revelation cycle of the candles, seals, trumpets, thunders, and the plagues, and then the regeneration. And that cycle goes on in you simultaneous. And then the cycle of the resurrection, the body change, the rapture, the wedding supper tribulation period, the millennium, the white throne, and out into new heaven, new earth. That cycle goes on inside you, continuous. And so we're talking about influences today on those cycles. An important key to health is discovering how to work with your personality strengths instead of against them. When you develop personality strengths, if you don't yet know your core values, many of those strengths may be exactly what you don't need. And therefore, as you come through life and begin to understand that, you begin to fight against your own strengths. And if you know those core values of yourself and how to work your personality strengths and things instead of against them, you can strengthen your strengths. I know that sounds crazy. Everybody says we need to strengthen our weaknesses, but you need to strengthen your strengths. And in so doing, your weaknesses will become stronger. But if you go the other route, while you're trying to strengthen your weaknesses, your strengths are going to become your weaknesses. So develop your core values, strengthen who you are, and in so doing, you're always going to have weaknesses. You're always going to have them. So stop worrying about those. Know your strengths and strengthen those things up in your life all the time. And in so doing, you're going to find out that it shores everything up and strengthens everything. So a lot of people point to your weaknesses. I always tell them they're right. Thank you. I already noticed those. And I will be working on them. So we're going to talk on, those were some things that I talked a little bit about as far as your personality. And one of the things I want to talk about today that influences your cycles that you are in and the way you view these things, your trumpets, your vials, your new heaven, new earth, all those things that are in you. The candles, you are the light of the world. Out of the candles, out of you comes the seals, which are, the seals were contrasts, the two running parallel together. The trumpets were the message to move you further. The thunders are the secrets about those things that you're understanding that's only given to you in a white stone. And then the plagues are for purging. So you're at the same time you're receiving new things and understanding new things. You're purging out the old. And then new heaven, new earth. That's what you have when you purge out the old. You bring in the new. It's new heaven and new earth. And in the resurrection cycle, that's going on in you all the time. Every time you catch something new, you come right back through a resurrection cycle. It's not just a cycle out here in the world. It's you individually. You catch something new, you have a resurrection. You're like, wow, that's good. I want to use that, or I want to be that. And when that happens, you go through a body change, or you change your lifestyle based on what you found out. And then what happens next is a rapture, or you're caught up into a higher level of thinking and lifestyle. And then after the rapture comes the wedding supper and the tribulation period. So the tribulation period is kind of throwing those things out that you find out you don't need and changing them. And the wedding supper, of course, is a new food that you're eating on every single day. And that takes you into the millennium, into a rest. And when you come into that rest, then comes the white throne judgment. You begin to judge all things worthy. You begin to judge yourself worthy. You begin to judge the world worthy. You begin to judge all things worthy through the life of Christ. And that puts you into a regenerated new heaven and new earth. It goes on every single day. Now, while the revelation cycle is going on, and while the resurrection cycle is going on, these two cycles simultaneously working in you, you got influences that are hitting you every single day. One of them is your birth order, or what I call family ties. And what it means is you're birthed into a family. You may be an only child. That means a lot. You may be the firstborn, and then there's 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever after you. And you may be the middle child. You may be the youngest child. Every single one of those things influences your life. The firstborn children, as you look at this, think about the things that goes on in your family life every day. And the firstborn, the characteristics of the firstborn children are reliable, because normally you're young when you have them, and because you're young, you want to instill into them everything that you can. And it seems like that the parents, you know how it goes when you do something for the first time, you really want to get it right. So you instill a lot of things into that child, and that child becomes very reliable. Well, that's going to affect how that child goes through those trumpets and those revelation cycles and the resurrection cycle. It's going to affect them. And they have things like reliability, consciousness. They're structured, more structured than most of the other children. They're very cautious. They're controlling, sometimes bossy, even to the parents, to the ones below them, whatever it might be. And usually the firstborn child is the highest achiever. Doesn't happen every time, but normally it's because the parents are putting so much attention into that firstborn that those things happen. They want to excel at everything. They want to be the best. They want the rest of the children, their siblings, to look up to them. They want the parents to be satisfied with them. They want all these things, and they bask in the parents' attention. So when you take those things and you place them into the cycle, the two cycles, how's that going to affect them? They're going to have a larger ego. They're going to understand more. They're going to have more. They're going to have taken more in than most. And so it's going to affect them in those cycles more than it does the other children. And one of the devastating things it is to a firstborn is they are dethroned when a second child comes along. All of a sudden they don't get the attention. They don't get there's all kinds of things that happens. And even though they may never tell you as a parent, they feel it, they know it. They've been dethroned. They're not the king or the queen of the house anymore. And this can cause a lot of issues inside those cycles. Issues of loneliness, defeat, retreat, all kinds of different things. And this may have a lasting influence on them. Take a look at Ishmael and Isaac. Ishmael was the firstborn. But we're watching today, we're still watching the war over there between Ishmael and Isaac. After thousands upon thousands of years, that jealousy still lays in there for the way that Abraham done Ishmael. And he gave everything to Isaac through Sarah, and all of his inheritance went to Isaac and nothing went to Ishmael. And when he did that, there's been a conflict ever since. Even between the nations now, there's a great conflict. So what happened to Ishmael in the cycle of Revelation? He became a very hurt child. He didn't receive the things he should have received in his mind. And all of that cycle turned him into a very bitter person. And so you come over and you look at Isaac, on the other hand, he received all those blessings, he received everything. So that cycle became a real positive thing to him. And it built a nation that was much more positive and much more enriched in values and worth than Ishmael's nations were. So we see this now. The middle child, talking about family ties and how these influence you. The middle child tends to be the family peacekeeper and often possesses traits like agreeableness, loyalty. It's common for middle children to be sociable, faithful in their relationships, good at relating to both older and younger people. It's because they, coming up in the middle, they didn't receive the attention from the parents that the firstborn received when they were by themselves. So that kind of leveled them out a little bit, and they maybe didn't receive so many new things. I mean, if you were going to buy one pair of clothes, you had to buy it for the firstborn. They were the ones that were living then. There wasn't another child to buy for. So you bought everything new for that firstborn, whatever it might be. And the secondborn, or the middle child, whoever that might be, they didn't get those things. 90% of the time they got hand-me-downs. They were wearing the other one's clothes. They were passed down as each one of them grew and things like that. Attention at eating. All of those things. Attention at discipline. With a middle child, that's a whole lot less. A middle child syndrome is a feeling of exclusion by the firstborn, by the parents. They feel a little bit excluded because they feel like they're not receiving the attention or getting to do, because the firstborn's older, so the parents are going to begin to release them a little sooner. And the middle child, they say, no, you can't go do that. But they see their older brother or sister going and doing it. And so in their minds, they are deprived, so to speak, of this exclusion is the way they feel is happening. They're deprived of being able to do things. And this effect occurs because the first child is more prone to receiving privileges and responsibilities, and they're older. And while the youngest in the family is more likely to receive indulgences. So you got the oldest, you got the middle child or children, and then the young one. And the young one gets all the indulgences, all the blessings, all the little things from the parents that the middle children didn't get. So they kind of sit back and say, you know what? my parents didn't love me like they did my older brother or sister, and like they did so and so because he was the youngest or she was. And the middle ones say they didn't love me as much, which is not true. They just love them in a different way. And so what happens is when you're going through these cycles, all of these things, family ties, they play on you, and they are part of or an influence over your development. And know that when you're in a fellowship with someone, with a group of people, and all of a sudden you start feeling the tendency, or you get the feeling that you're not getting the attention that somebody else is getting. You're not getting just play that back. Don't be ignorant to what you came up under, and it will probably run right back to when you were a child and how you felt. And those feelings never leave. And every time you get in that situation, you feel that way. Then you can tell yourself, look over it. It's not what you think it is. You can work with yourself, and you can come out much better in those cycles than you would otherwise, having those hard feelings and feelings of loneliness, feelings of exclusion, all these kinds of feelings that you pick up. Now, the middle children are more independent as they gain confidence. I used to say this, I would watch my older brothers, I had two of them, and I would watch and see what they got by with. And then I knew I could get by with it. And I would watch and see what they got to do. And then I knew at some point I was going to get to do that. And so what you do is you build an independency to where that you know what you're going to receive, you know what you want to do, and you know what you can get by with. And so you build an independency and just begin to do that. Well, when you get into fellowship with one another as adults and everything else, and you're moving through these cycles every day, you're going to have a tendency in you to just be independent. You know, don't pay any attention to what so-and-so says. Mine is the smarter. Mine is the more experienced. What I have is more elite. And you're going to feel those tendencies to move in that way of independence. And independence is good, but it's good when it comes by revelation and understanding, and not so much by the way you were made to feel when you were younger. So run those things back and say to yourself, you know, I do want to take their opinions. I do want to listen to them. I do want to change my values at times. I do want to do all these things because it's going to help me and it's going to influence me so much more. These middle children typically have more freedom and less pressure on them growing up. So when you get into a group and you've got 2 or 3 in the group that are putting the pressure on you for whatever it might be, and you feel it, it's something you didn't feel much when you were growing up, when the things were happening in your life. As a young child and as an adolescent and coming into adulthood, just absorb those feelings. Just think about it. Think about what they're saying. Think about the different things that you can do for them, and work through those feelings. Sometimes they can get away with more as a child than the firstborn did or the younger one did. Because the parent, no matter who they are, I don't care who you are, you're going to pay a little less attention to them than you did your firstborn. You built that into your firstborn, your constant attention. And your lastborn is like, I just want to keep them around a little bit longer. I want to love them a little bit more. I want to hold on to them. The middle children didn't get that. And so sometimes they get away with more. It's unnoticed. It'd be very noticed if it was in the last child or the first child when you were growing up. So then when you step into the world and you start your career, or you start your jobs, or you start your family life, your husband, your wife, your whatever it might be, and all of a sudden these things are being pointed out to you that you got away with for so long, don't feel like the person dislikes you because of that. They are actually doing what you did to your firstborn, or what you're going to do to your firstborn and to your lastborn, and they're doing what your parents did to the first and lastborn while you were in their presence. They're paying more attention to you, and they're noticing things, and they want to help you develop and get past that. It's kind of a hard thing to go through. But just know that sometimes things need to be purged out of you as the plagues do. Know that things need to, while you're eating this great food, some of the tribulation period is family ties. There's some great family ties. Bring into your family the joy, the peace, the long-suffering, the meekness, the kindness, the goodness, the faith. All these things that you receive from your parents, bring those in. And then the things that seem to not do so well in the family ties, be willing to submit to your own obedience and change it and pay attention to it. The pressure is off the lastborn in terms of having to meet their parents' high experiences and standards. So they are more likely to achieve in their own ways. When you see an achiever, someone who's pretty well figured everything out, they know how to get by, they know all those things. Most of the time, early in life, that's a firstborn or a lastborn. And most of the time, a lastborn, because all the pressure was off of them by the time they got down to the second, third, fourth, or fifth, or sixth child. The parents just kind of like, love them to death, but let's get through this. Love them like mad. And all the pressure's kind of off. And so what they do is they develop in their own ways. They pay attention to the things they like instead of the things their parents like. They pay attention to the things that interest them instead of the things that interest their parents. They pay attention to so many things, friendships. They build closer friendships, all those kinds of things, because the pressure's off of them from their parents and from their siblings and everything else. And so they develop a lot on their own. They learn when they're young that if they persist with what they want, they will outlast their siblings and wear out their parents, and they will get it. That is exactly what you'll do inside those cycles until you grow up and you learn and you understand what's going on in your life. And you know that some of those feelings come from your childhood, from your adolescence, from your family ties. So those are the things that many times, so many things, just things as simple as where once you kind of have a pecking order, if you want to call it that, at the dinner table or anywhere, watch yourself for the next 2 or 3 weeks. See if you don't sit at the same place. Just like right here, I walked in here this morning, I threw my stuff down here, and I came here and sat down. I sat in the same place. At the table, I sat in the same place. All the family will do that. Sit at the dinner table, or if you go out somewhere to a restaurant, you'll catch yourself doing the same thing, and it ain't even your home, it ain't your house, it ain't It ain't your table, but you'll do the same thing. You'll catch yourself trying to set in a certain pecking order, and that means a lot. Whether you're the first child or the last child, whether you're sitting by mom or dad, or whether you're sitting in the middle, it means a whole lot, because you'll get the attention of the parent. Or if you're sitting next to a sibling on each side, you're going to feel better about in your career and everything else, about being with your peers. You will find those ones that they call us sucking up. Those ones that do a lot of that are the first or the last born, who are sitting next to the mother or father, and they're getting all the attention and the talks from the mother and father during dinner. So they immediately, when they get into a career, they're going to do the same thing and try to always be with the boss, talk to the boss more than the others do. They feel more comfortable doing that. So all those things influence you. Where the child sits at the dinner table, whether they receive new clothes or hand-me-downs. Sharing bedrooms means a lot. You know, when you've got 2 or 3 or 4 boys in a bedroom, that's a whole lot different than having your own private bedroom. And that will influence you in your life in so many ways. So all these influences, privacy, many other things influence and develop a child in its early years. And it will influence how you go through those 2 cycles. Those cycles of resurrection and revelation. Excuse me. The next influence on you, and this is something that Hippocrates and different ones developed over years of study of the human body, is they noticed that certain types of bile identified certain types of people. If you don't know what bile is, you're talking about excrement that comes out of you, the fluids, what comes out your draw, all these things. And they found out that there are 4 types of bile, and that is the blood, and then there's yellow bile, and there's black bile, and there's phlegm, which is green. So you got red, yellow, black, and green. And if you don't think so, just watch yourself for a few weeks, the way you go to the restroom, and just look at it. And you'll find that sometimes it's got a red cast, sometimes it's got a green cast, sometimes it's, you say, well, that's the things you eat. That's the chemistry in your body. And there will be a dominant that you will look like most of the time. And they have found out that this dominant color in the people's excrement shows a nature. And I think that Carl Jung was the first one to come up with these names, but the nature, the blood or the red, he called it the sanguine. And the yellow bile, he called the choleric. The black bile is the melancholy. Most of us have heard that. And the phlegm or the green is the phlegmatic. And you find that most of the sanguines or the blood red biles, blood casts, are very buoyant people. They are outspoken. They have so many things about them. They talk off their sleeve. Sometimes they talk themselves into some pretty tight predicaments. And other times, if you listen to them and you're able to sort through all the static, they have some very good thoughts, but they're very buoyant outgoing, talking, and that is your sanguine. The yellow bile, or the choleric, is very commanding. They're dominant. They're domineering. They're people who deal in facts. They once they have what they believe is the truth, they're very forceful with it. And that's your choleric style, kind of like one of them compared it to a sergeant in the Army. You know, the sergeants are the ones that run the boot camps and everything else. And so that is your choleric. And then the melancholy, the black bile, is kind of a gloomy, it's a fearful thing. It's worrisome is a good way to put it. And that's your melancholy. They worry about things. They're very pessimistic about things. They just don't see anything good a lot of times coming out of something. And so that's your melancholy. And then your phlegm, or your green, or your phlegmatic is a passive, patient person. My dad was that way. He was very phlegmatic. If something come up in the family, now my mother was kind of a sanguine. And maybe my dad forced her to be that. Maybe she didn't want to be that. Sometimes you get put into a role that you don't want to be in. And so she was kind of the sanguine that was constantly after us, buoyant, and telling us, you know, and talking at us all the time. And I mean talking at us, not to us. And loved her to death, but many times she was that way. Well, it's because no matter what happened, Dad just kind of sat back in the chair and figured it'd work itself out. Come on. You know, this is life. It'll work itself out. Let it go. Better off to stay quiet about it. Let them learn their lessons. You know, he was that style of father. So I had a mother and a father that were in almost total contrast from one end of the pole to the other, and most families do one way or the other. Very seldom do you find a mother and father that are both balanced to the point they're playing the role that they want to play. They get put into roles that they have to play a lot of times when they just don't want to. So the phlegmatic just kind of sits back, lets it go, and says, you know what? The universe will work itself out. And this little thing about Johnny lying, that ain't got a whole lot to do with the universe. It'll work itself out. He'll learn better when he lies to the wrong person. Just let him learn his lesson. And that's the phlegmatic style. On the other hand, they can be very patient and loving. And if you got yourself into trouble as a child, who are you going to run to? You're certainly not going to run to the sanguine that's going to give it to you with all they got. You're going to run to the phlegmatic who pats them on the back and says, it's okay, baby. Everything will be just fine. We'll get through this together. Love you. And go on and play. And that's the way they are. Now, Hippocrates said phlegmatic, choleric, melancholic, or sanguine, each correlated with a body fluid. I just told you about the 4 body fluids. He theorized that a preponderance of one of the 4 humors was a strong predictor of a personality type. And we're talking about personality. So what he's saying is your chemistry in your body is going to develop according to your nature that you are developing. And it's going to develop into the dominancy or the dominant color of one sort. And it may have other colors as you go through life, but there's going to be a dominant color, and you're going to come out to where that is who you are. And I know that's kind of a crude way of talking about it, talking about the excrement that comes out of a person, but we're talking about universal things. We're talking about universal cycles that are going on in every person throughout the world. And when you're talking about that, there's a lot of things that influence you, from chemistry in your body to family ties of how you were treated at home. And so they came up with, after a lot of years, there were two people, Kiersey and Bates, that studied these two things, family ties and personality traits and the bile of a person, and they came up with something about certain traits that could be in people. And normally there are about 4 traits that really show up in you. There are 7 or 8 traits that come about based on family ties and bile and so forth. But they came up with these, and you usually, if you understand yourself, I've ran tests on myself, and they're out there for you in the book, Please Understand Me, and in a lot of other places. You can run a test on yourself. And I came out as an INTP. And everybody's sitting there, I is for introvert. And you're saying to yourself, Don, you're no introvert. Well, you just don't know my feelings. When I walk into a room and I don't know anybody, watch me. I'm almost ready to go to a corner somewhere and sit. I watched myself last night because I'm studying on this. When I walked into the room, the first thing I'd done was look for a familiar face at the party of Sister Aubrey's mother. I looked around and I thought, I don't know anybody at that table. I don't know any. There's Aubrey. And I walked over there real quick and patted her on the shoulder. And then I seen Sister Norad, and Aubrey was sitting with some of her friends, and I thought I won't bother her. And Sister Norad, I seen her, and I said, there you go. And I went straight over there. That's introvert. An extrovert would have walked to the table where they didn't know anybody and said, hey, how are you guys doing? How do you know Aubrey's mom, and where are you from? And again, they would have done all those things. But me, I sneak off there and sit down and spend most of my time talking to somebody I already know. That's an introvert. And so these things that they came up with: intuition, perception of meaning and possibilities by way of insight. So different ones have these things in them, and it's the way you perceive. Your intuition is working for you, and some people really know how to work it, and others not so much. Thinking decides from detached standpoint of logic and objectivity. So a thinker, they are going to make decisions from a detached standpoint. In other words, you're going to pull yourself out of the flow of emotion, and you're going to make a decision based on the logic of everything. And there's feeling, and feeling decides by associating with situations and considering values and needs of the people involved. So a feeler, those that work off of feelings, will get involved socially and begin to make their decisions based on values and the needs of the people they're around. Then there's perceiving, those with an orientation towards the function, to spend time gathering information as their circumstances unfold. As things are going along, you are perceiving things, and you're developing somewhat of a decision on what's going on around you by the things and the information and the circumstances. They're most comfortable leaving options open and undecided as long as possible. Have you ever seen the person, you walk in a room, you tell them 2 or 3 things, and they say, that's it, I want to go that way. And then you walk into a room somewhere and you talk to a person and you tell them this, and they say, that's good, but what about this? And what about this? And did you look into the details of this? And where did you get your information from? Do you have 2 or 3 sources? Did that come from science, or did that come from religion? And they're constantly digging and digging and digging and digging. And that's the way those that are perceiving are, and they leave their answers, their decisions, they try to leave them open as long as they can. Because when they make it, they want it to be the correct decision. But many times, that ends up being a detriment to them too. Many times, all you need to know is about 20% of the situation, and you can make a correct decision from there. If you think not, when the next election comes up, watch. They'll only have 3%, 4% of the vote in. And already they're saying so-and-so is going to win this, so-and-so is going to win that. Why? Because they are able to get somewhat of circumstances and information, and from that, you figure the rest of the flow is going to be pretty much the same. And it ends up, most of the time, they're right. Every once in a while, they have to call a name back and say so-and-so won it. But don't necessarily think that you have to have all the information to have the right decision and the right answer. And then there's judging. Those with an orientation towards this function move quickly through the information. They gather it very quickly. They look through it in order to reach conclusions and closure as quickly as possible. Now, you're going through these cycles, resurrection and revelation. You get a thinker in the room, and you get a judger in the room. What's going to happen? The thinker is going to say, I want to know more about it. I want to know about this and this and this and this. I want to understand more. How many people went through that? Have you found those kind of patterns in the Bible, in this or that? And the judger is just saying, look, we got the answer. We got the answer. Don't worry about it. Let's go. Let's go. And both of them are going to have to work through the situation, or before it's over with, they're going to have really hard feelings toward one another. By the time you live with one another for 2 or 3 years, by the time that you go through 25 different things, and the judger is right a lot of the times, and the thinker's right a lot of times, but you know what happens? They forget about the times they were wrong. You're going to have to come together. You're going to have to blend together, and you're going to have to. This is why you need to know your personalities and the way you are, so that you're able to work with people who are just the exact opposite of you. And you work with them. They're going through things in the cycles just like you are. And a problem comes up, whatever that problem might be. A child who's skipping school. And you didn't know it till they already had 12 days in, and the truant officer's coming to your house and knocking on the door. And the father says, I told you so. I told you he was doing this. I told you he was doing that. And the mother said, I was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. I was trying to keep things open so we don't upset him. So you got to work together. Take these problems and these issues, and when you're seeing them, you work with them, you work through them. So we have these thinkers. They say there's planners. They plan their world around consistency, responsibility, and rules. Those people are very hard to get along with because they look for consistency, which mostly human natures do not have. Maybe in 1 or 2 things they're very consistent. The rest of it's kind of habit forming. It's not that they are consistent, it's just a habit for them. It's not that important to them. So you get a thinker or you get a planner around these consistencies, responsibilities, and rules, and they see their siblings, or they see their husband or wife, their spouses, they see them breaking these rules, going outside these consistencies, and not being the responsible person they think they should be. And it builds up anxiety, it builds up anger, it builds up strife and envy, it builds up all sorts of things. And they see these little special things going on between one or the other. And it just builds up such an improbable situation that's hard to take care of. I'm going to say this, and I won't use names, but that's exactly what was going on some years ago. I remember one of the brothers came into the church new, and we hit it off just like that because we were hunters. And I always look, because I'm an introvert, I look for something where we're the same. I don't look for something where we're different. And we start talking. And we were both hunters. And so we got involved, and then, we went to a farm, and some guy let us hunt on it for a couple of years, and then he wanted to sell it to us, so we bought it together. And all these things were going on, and I'm an Aquarian, and Aquarians don't look for so much for individual issues. Aquarians look for a cause. Aquarians look for a cause to work for, and they work themselves to death for. But to look for an individual issue in Alan, I just don't do it. All I see is a good man, a great man, a perfect man. She's perfect, isn't he, Aubrey? Greatest man ever was. That's all I see.
Yeah.
Sister Norad, Sister Aubrey, whoever that's all I see. I think that's a good person. And then when someone comes along and just obliterates them in my presence and says something about them, I'm like, it knocks me backwards, because I don't see that in a person, whoever it might be. So an Aquarian is that way. And what happens is we end up having conflict with one another because of our natures in the zodiac, because of all those things. We have a person who so-and-so thinks is their personality is no good, and we have a person here who thinks their personality is just great. And I go through that all the time because I don't see bad. And when we were at the church, the other place, when this brother came in, and I just immediately, I thought, we got plenty of things we can do together. And I didn't realize it was forming such a jealousy in some of the other brothers, until they just pulled back. And by the time that they broke away from me, I was like, what in the world happened? Well, you were putting your attention to this brother. You were hunting with him. You bought farms with him. If that's who you want to be your friend, go on. That's the way they felt. And there was more than one felt that way. And I just thought, good Lord, can I have more than one friend? But that's what happens when you get these mixtures of things that went on in people's lives. And sometimes you just miss it. You didn't see it. You didn't understand it. That's where you have to come into the cycles and work the cycles for you, and work yourself into a position to where you can at least get along. Many times it's broken then with me. And there was another brother came into the church. And I asked him, I said, would you, because I only had one brother that was taking care of the live broadcast. I said, would you mind going back and sitting with the brother that's taking care of the live broadcast and learn how to do it? And that way he can take a break occasionally. He can just come in, sit down, and have a good time. And I said that to both of them, and they were agreeable to that. And then the next thing I knew, You know, I was trying to replace the brother, and I didn't want him back there anymore. I was like, whoa, I'm trying to help. But that's what happens when you get different thinkers, different planners. You get people that are different altogether, and they come up through family ties. They come up through things in their family life. And all of this is influencers on your cycles and the things that are going through your life. Thinkers, think about the world mentally, actively, questioning, and innovating. Movers, they move in and about their world. Spontaneous, adventurous, risk takers, change agents. When a mover sees a change going on, he's not one to try to set the furniture back in the same place it was. He or she's going, yeah, let's do that. Zoom, they'll help you out. Well, many times you get 2 or 3 movers all together in a group, and they're going to run off and leave the rest of the group. And then you have to the rest of the group says, this ain't no fun anymore. Well, you got to think about that. Pay attention. You develop that movement mentality in your life and that change agent in your life and that risk taker. If you're afraid to fail, you're not going to do much in life. Everything that I ever done when I was in the corporation, it was a larger move that would affect anywhere from 1,000 people in a plant up to 25 or 30,000 and sometimes 60 or 70,000 for any move that I took. And what that meant was I either changed the entire process and changed the people's thinking and moved them into the way we wanted to go as a corporation, into the vision, or I failed and we had to do something else or start over again or figure out where we failed at and fix it. And if you go through too many of those risk-taking failures, you're probably going to need to update your resume. And so we got afraid of that because we grew up in that through corporations, through lifestyles, through families, everything else. So we're afraid to take risks. Well, there's no failure in this. When it comes to spirituality and understanding, there's no failure in this. You learn and you move on. Take your risks. Look at things. Look at how many things since 2014 that I've taken a major risk on. And even maybe implemented some of it in a way that I could have done it better. And lost a lot of friends in the middle of all that risk taking and coming to this message and this understanding. A lot of friends walked away. But you still have to have it in you to want to do these things and to move forward. Luther took a lot of risk. Wesley took a lot of risk. William Branham took a lot of risk. Tried to assassinate him several times and overseas, things like that. You take a lot of risks. So these things are all influencers on how you grew up, what your body chemistry is, your family ties, all of these things. Their temperaments. I haven't said much about them. But the evidence is clear. An important key to health is discovering how to work with your personality strengths. Work with those strengths. Your personality, you may have a strength that whatever it might be, agility, cognizance, pulling things together, mending relationships, whatever your strengths are, work on those strengths. It will build your weaknesses stronger by working on your strengths. So I want to come to a point, we've looked at the family ties, and we've looked at the bile in our body, the black, yellow, red, and green. And I said that some scientists tied in natures and personalities into those family ties and into those biles of each person. And that's called your temperaments. These have a huge influence on you in your life. A temperament is the way you tend to behave, or the types of emotions you tend to exhibit. So we look at a person and we see them as buoyant, flamboyant. A lot of Leos are not only buoyant, but they're flamboyant. And there's all kinds of things that are influencing you. That's another thing that I'm going to go into, and that is the zodiac. So you have family ties that happen in your early childhood. You have the chemistry in your body, and you have the temperaments of your nature that develop through these things, and then you have the zodiac. So you got these 4 things going on in your life all the time that are influencing you as a person going through these cycles of revelation and resurrection. So the temperaments is the way that you tend to behave, or the types of emotions you tend to exhibit when a person is calm and collected and doesn't tend to get mad easily. This is an example of a person with a calm temperament. We talk about those that, man, they got a wild temper. We talk about others that you can say anything you want. That person never gets mad. They were talking about William Branham, and they said, they asked one of the men that was there in the Branham Tabernacle with him most of his life. They said, what did you see? What was the main thing that you saw about William Branham that you really liked? And the brother said, it was the fact that you didn't know who his friends and his enemies were, because he treated them all the same. And I thought, now there's a man that's just very calm natured, very intuitive, not so much of a thinker, conflict, all of those things. And I looked up William Branham's his zodiac sign. When he was born, all you have to do is go in and he tells where he was born, in Burkesville, Kentucky. He tells what time it was, early morning, about 2 in the morning, I believe he said. He tells the year it was. So I took it and put it in and brought it all up some years ago now. And almost every one of his planets, you have all those planets out there, and you have the moon, you have almost every one of these planets were in a fire sign. And I said, whoa, look at this. What that means is he was a man on fire. He was burning the whole time. What that means is you're an excellent starter, but you're not going to finish very much. And if you're out here in careers and projects and everything else, you take a person who has that kind of, he's the only person I ever saw, and I've done thousands of people in the corporations. He's the only person I ever saw had a sign like that. And he needed that because he was in such conflict all the time. If he didn't have a character that would just burn it out, throw it aside all the time, he never would have made it through. He had nervous breakdowns the way he was. He had 2 of them. Had one back in 1946, 45, 46, during the healing time when it broke out, and he had one in 1963 when he said, I quit, I'm going away, I'm going to be. He had 2 nervous breakdowns What in the world would have he had he had a normal zodiac, the signs and the characters of zodiac? He never could have took it. So these family ties, the chemistry in your body, the temperaments that build into your character, and the zodiac are four things that are constantly projecting and influencing you every day of your life as you are moving through the cycles. The four fundamental personality types exist. These are your temperaments, and they are sanguine, choleric, melancholic, and phlegmatic. Now, sanguine is an enthusiastic, active, social, a talker, comfortable in any room, anywhere, totally comfortable, doesn't worry about whether it's friends or foes, doesn't worry about anything. They are just, when they walk into a room, they're almost just going to take it over. And it's because of their flamboyancy and all the things about them. They're talkative, they're communicative, they're all of these things. That's a sanguine. And a choleric is a short-tempered, fast thinker. It gets very irritable. When you get a choleric in the room with a sanguine, you know what a choleric's going to be thinking most of the time? I wish that guy or that gal or that girl, I wish they would shut up. That's what a choleric would be thinking, unless he knows how to use his choleric style or hers. When you know how to use it, you can work with the sanguine, get through your short-temperedness, get through your trying to make fast decisions, and get through your irritability with that person, and you're going to find they have a lot you can learn from. And vice versa. The sanguine's going to be thinking to themselves, does this person ever talk? What? Are they deaf? They dumb? What's wrong with them? They'd be thinking all kinds of, that's the way sanguines are. And so you see this going on. Now, melancholic, they're worriers. They the world is on their shoulders. When you find a person who is pessimistic, nothing's going to turn out right, politics are going to be horrible, religion is just not going to make it through, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, we're all going to die, the sky's going to fall, Mr. Chicken Little just doesn't, oh my God, it's all falling apart all around us, and we are in a real mess here. Melancholic. Phlegmatic. They looked at melancholic. They said, just settle down. Just take it easy. Chill out. It'll be okay. 5 years from now, you won't even be worried about any of these things that you're worried about now. 5 years from now, you'll be on a totally different path. You'll have 2 kids. You'll have a family. But you know what? That saying when I say, yeah, you're right. Or that melancholy, you're right, yep. I understand what you're saying. But they'll find a dozen more things 5 years from now. It won't be that, but it'll be the kids, it'll be the home, it'll be the family, it'll be the bills, it'll be the this, it'll be the that, constantly, because they are worriers. Now, that is good. If you want to keep your bills and things in proper order, I'm more of a phlegmatic and kind of a choleric in ways, and I just hand the checkbook to my wife because she's more of a melancholy, and I know it's all going to be taken care of. She can't let a day go by. Oh, if it gets a day past the deadline, good God, the world's ended. And that's good. That's good. So think about how you can use one another's strengths and weaknesses to the best of your abilities to get together and get along. The same one is a very social person who likes to be with people. Now you come to the phlegmatic. That's the last one. The same one was the first one. Peace at all cost. That's the phlegmatic. That's their motto. Peace at all costs. The phlegmatic has no fear of rejection. Can handle unaffectionate and hostile people. They just kind of, you know how a dog does? They just kind of turn their head and look. Phlegmatics are pretty good at doing that. It's like, wow, you're mad, aren't you? Whether it's a spouse, a sibling, or somebody in your career, and they're just unloading on you. You're like, okay. You feel better now? How do you really feel? That's just the way they are. They're very calm, realistic, and a phlegmatic has no fear of rejection, handling unaffectionate and hostile people. They're calm, easygoing people who are not plagued with the emotional outbursts, exaggerated feelings, anger and bitterness, or unforgiveness, as are all of the other temperaments. They get those in them and they have to really work themselves through them. But a phlegmatic, a phleg, if you want to call them that, they don't have those. But on the other hand, a phleg is not going to gain the experience that the other three are, because they're willing to let the experience go. They're willing to just turn their mind to it. So you have all of these things influencing those candles and the seals and the trumpets and the thunders and the plagues and the regeneration. All of these things are influencing it. The way you came up, where you sit at the table, whether it was mother or father, whose favorite were you? Maybe you weren't a favorite. And all parents have them. Don't care who you are. You have favorites. All of those things happen, and all of this is dealt with us. What time is it?
11:20.
Okay. So we have these four temperaments, and I wanted to dwell on those for just a few minutes. Family ties, you've come all the way up. You've come through. You're building your character. You're building your chemistry in your body. You're building up your temperaments. You're living under the sign of the zodiac, which we'll get into that. All of these things are affecting you. Wherever one of your planets are at the time of your birth, whether they were in a water sign, a fire sign. I looked mine up, and I can tell you, of course, my sun is in Aquarius, which is an air sign, and the very highest in the frequencies of air signs. So sometimes I can get way out there and expect everybody to get way out there with me, when slow but sure I learned this. I'm so far out there on so many things, if I can just get people to see one of them, I dance. I'm so happy. And so, but me being an Aquarian, my sun is in Aquarius, my moon, my sun in Aquarius takes me way out there. You know the song, this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius and so forth. It takes you way out there. Almost everybody that studies astrology says that Aquarians are 50 to 100 years ahead of the rest of the population. Most of the time, Aquarians are the ones that come up with inventions. Aquarians are the ones that come up with with all the sorts of things that you see out here in technology that we're using today. And it's because they go so far out there that if they didn't come up with it, they were involved with the person who came up with it, because they are way out in thinking and in evolving so far out ahead of the rest of the population. My moon is in Taurus. You know that Taurus is an earth sign. I think you're a Taurus, is that right? That's why we get along so well.
I tolerate you being out there. I can cope with it.
But my moon, you know what the moon does? It controls the emotion. So if my moon had been Aquarian on top of Aquarian sun, I would be out there and I would care less about you and whether you made it out there or not. I'd just be blasting away and wouldn't be thinking anything about you. But with my moon in Taurus, it drags, it pulls, and it's like a magnet that pulls me back toward feeling for the earth, feeling for the other people. And in so doing, it kind of levels me out when it comes to my emotions, even though inside I want to go. I back myself down and say, look, you can be a mover, but if you move too fast, nobody's going to go with you. You know, if you have a vision and nobody is going with you, it wasn't a vision, it was a hallucination. So I don't want to have a hallucination. So moon in Taurus, my ascending sign, those are the three very important things. The sun, the moon, and your ascending sign is in Aries. So that puts me air, earth, and fire. And Aries is it's a very nervous. Aries is a very a sign that is a shaker and a mover, and Aries is a sign that many times it can break down if it's not careful. So what happens is the Aquarius takes me way out there, the moon pulls me back, and my ascending sign sets me somewhere in between, to where it's going to be very hard. If you think you're going to break me down, you're going to have a long, hard time doing it. You need to bring your lunch, because it's not going to happen. But me, on the other hand, I want to step back and not run out there by myself. I want people to go with me and to understand. So, and we'll get into how the zodiac develops us in several different ways, just exactly like everything else does. So the sanguine, you take a sanguine, and a sanguine has a chemistry in its body that's red, the color red. The aura is red. The excrement is red. The personality is red, very talkative and very communicative and very flamboyant and all of those things. It's red. Probably some of its dominant planets is going to be in fire signs like Mercury, or some of those signs out there that are fire signs. Sanguines are naturally people-oriented. They have an active, positive movement in a favorable environment. They influence their environment by encouraging others to work together. The sanguine is by far the most versatile of the four temperaments. The choleric, phlegmatic, and melancholy are all limited in what they can do when it comes to communication. But a sanguine can get there. So when you're in a group and everybody makes statements like, everybody should talk, everybody should participate, everybody should have something to say. Well, a phlegmatic's got something to say by just sitting there. And a sanguine's got something to say by saying it. And a choleric may sit there and evaluate everything and then boom, judge it, and doesn't talk a lot, but all of a sudden, bang, 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 bang. Here comes 4 or 5 things, and you say, wow, why didn't you say those before? But that's the way a choleric is. And you take a melancholy, and they're going to be the type of person that just wants more and more and more and more and more information. I'm worried. I'm not so sure that's right. I'm not so sure we should go there. I don't know about this. Are you sure? Did you study that out? Do you know that to be true? That's your melancholy. So when you get this working in a group, it can be a very great thing. And don't think that the phlegmatic is not contributing. They are contributing by being there, by listening, by paying attention. And a phlegmatic is the type of person that when the meeting's over and you're sitting around at the table and you decide you're going to eat your food, they bring out everything they seen during the meeting. They say, while you were talking, I saw this. While you were talking, I saw that. That's a phlegmatic. It's because they don't like to be in formal, quote, type meetings. They like for things to flow easy. And when they get out of that formality, there's a lot of things they'll tell you about, but they're not going to tell you that in a group. They're just not going to do it. That's a phlegmatic style. A sanguine style will let it all out in the group. A choleric will listen to all of it and kind of judge it and evaluate it, if you want to call it that. And the melancholy is the worrisome one that keeps asking the details, wanting to know more about what's going on. So you have that. The choleric temperament is the fewest in number. That whole concept of evaluating and judging, there's not going to be many of those in the group that just say, we don't have much information on, but I can tell you right now, based on what we have, this is where it's going. There's not many of them like that. And then you have the phlegmatic and the melancholy temperaments. They're not change agents. They're just not. I have an aunt and an uncle, which they're both passed on now on the other side. Patty knows we would go and visit them. And it's where we would go when I was a young boy and visit, so I just kind of kept that pattern. When I go down to visit everybody in Kentucky, that would be where we would stay. And I don't remember in my 50 years of going there that one picture changed, that the couch ever said anywhere else. Everything was exactly the same. If a hole came into the linoleum in the floor, you might see a rug the next time you went, but the linoleum wasn't changed. They didn't do it. It was the colors exactly the same, tan, and they were never painted. You go in there, the wood stove, it was the exact same wood stove. You'd think that somebody would say, we need a new wood stove occasionally. It was unbelievable. We'd both go away and laugh and talk about it and say, wow, how do they live that way? Well, that's kind of a phlegmatic style. We'll get, this is life. We'll get through it. We don't need the extravagance. We don't need this. We don't need that. They don't like to adapt to change. Phlegs and melancholies. Whereas cholerics and sanguines, they're fine with adapting to change. The sanguine has the potential for the widest range of behavior due to possessing the widest range of emotion and communication. This allows them to participate based on their second temperaments, because we all have a second one. Like me, I think I'm a flag chlor or chlor flag. I'm not sure which. They're both about the same in me. They like to participate in or change their environment. Sanguines just love to do it. If anybody has a sanguine wife, it's me. When it comes to the household, you can't hardly go from one day to the next and find where anything's at. It's been moved. It's put into something else. It's over here. It's over there. Everything in the living room gets moved every so often. Everything gets moved. And when she's finished painting, she paints the walls. When she's finished painting, she's picking out a color for the next. Oh, I think this would be a good color here. Oh, you just painted. I know, but I'm just saying this would be a good color next time. That is sanguine, and they're fine with change. And my flag kind of says, come on, let's get used to this before we go to something else. But she's just that way. And so we have in politics and sports and entertainment and all these different things, a sanguine is going to act one way, a choleric, a melancholy, and a phlegmatic will act another. So, and you know what you are. You don't have to run a test to figure out what you are. And you will be different things based on what part of life you're in. In a career, you may be an absolute sanguine. You've got to take care of everything right down the line. And when you come home, because you are that in your career, you don't want to be a sanguine at home. So you kind of take the choleric or the phlegmatic mode at home. And so you switch up based on what you're doing in life. I know when I was in the corporation, I was a sanguine. I was writing all the regulations. I was writing all the training manuals. I was going out and working with every person and making sure that all these things got implemented on a machine, in a factory, in a division. And I was doing all of those things, and I was a constant sanguine. But I was introvert. When I got home, Patty knows me. Sometimes she has to tap me on the shoulder and say, "You all right? You still here? Are you breathing?" Because I go phlegmatic when I get home. And you're going to be different things in life. So and this is going to influence your cycles, and know that the cycles in you, the candles, the seals, the trumpets, the thunders, the plagues, the regeneration of the earth, those things that are working simultaneous in you, these characters or these temperaments are a part of you. The whole chemistry of your body is a part of it. And the cycle of the resurrection is the same way. So you've got the sanguine. It's an extrovert, fun-loving, playful, active, prone, impulsive, entertaining, persuasive, easily amused, optimistic. They're enthusiastic, expressive, tend to be very affectionate, personable, receptive, open to others, build relationships quickly. They're animated, excitable, approachable, accepting, trustworthy, trusting. They will smile and talk easily and often. Sanguines are wordsmiths. They just constantly are doing things, and they have something in mind when they're doing it, and that is, I'm going to develop, and it's not that I'm going to take over this room, but I'm going to make sure that my character and influence is a part of this. And I'm going to make sure that my character, influence, and love and these things, its input is there. It's not unusual to feel as if you have known one who is sanguine for years after the first meeting. So they have that style about them. sanguines. A choleric. Cholerics are naturally results oriented. You know, you get the melancholy and even the sanguine, and they're looking at how we get there. All of the facts, all of the information, all of the, they're looking at the path along the way, whereas a choleric is more results oriented. The end justifies the means. I don't care how we get there is a choleric, but the result needs to be this. Now, how are we going to get there? And then the sanguine and the melancholy kind of take over, while the choleric and the phleg say, when are we going to get there? You ever have them in the backseat of a car? How much longer, Mom? How much longer, Dad? That's the choleric or the phleg showing up in a person. They don't care how you get there. They just don't want it to be so long. They don't want it to be so boring. They don't want it to be so whatever. In their minds, the details are boring. So they're results oriented. They have active, positive, and forward movement in an antagonistic environment. They can keep moving forward. They influence their environment by overcoming opposition to get results. So a choleric is a conqueror, it's a fighter, it's all of those things. They are extroverted, quick thinking, active, practical, strong-willed, easily annoyed. They're self-confident, self-sufficient, very independent-minded. They're brief, direct, to the point, firm when communicating with others, analytical. Cholerics are like pressure. You know, you get some people, they cannot take the pressure. A choleric, pressure doesn't bother them at all. And I've seen many men like that in life. You'll think, man, it seems like they're just bringing the pressure on themselves. And they can do that. Cholerics like pressure, easily bored when things are not happening or moving fast enough. They are bold and like to take risks. So a choleric wants to get to the end result as quickly as possible and wants to influence what that result is going to be. They're domineering, decisive, opinionated. They find it easy to make decisions for themselves. But the issue is sometimes they find it easy to make decisions for others. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. And it causes conflict. They wake up wanting to control. They have to have control. Whereas the sanguine wants to have their input. A sanguine wants to make sure that their character and their love is a part of the whole mix. A choleric wants control. They want to control, change, or overcome things, anything. Have you ever seen it? You try to do something and it's something you're doing with a group or whatever, and the choleric will jump in and almost try to take the group over. Maybe you're doing something at a training class, and they'll have more to say than you do sitting on the seat out there. Or by whatever's going on, a choleric wants to take control, no matter what it is, of anything. If you're a parent, you tell the child to do something, the choleric will step in and either tell them in a commanding way to do the same thing so that they're the one that told them and not you, or they'll change up what you said, and the child's doing something else in front of you and they say, I told you not to do that, and they say, yeah, but Dad or Mom said I could. Choleric style. I will control. You need to think about those things when you're going through these cycles and mend those things, work on those things, and fix them up better so that you have a much better relationship between you, whether it's in a group or in a family at home. Choleric leaves little room for negotiating. Amen. I've seen so many of them in my work life. Choleric is a style that There's no bending. There's no middle ground. Choleric is black and white, and there's no gray. And you really don't want to be that. That is a trait in them that can sometimes cause divorces, cause children to run away, cause businesses to shut down, on and on and on, because they're not willing to take the opinion of others and develop it into part of what the result is. They want to have the final say on what the result is. The great thing about cholerics is they don't give in to pressure. The pressure doesn't bother them, so you can use them in the right situations. They can be crusaders. They can be cheerleaders. They can be sergeants. They can be commanders. They can do a whole lot of things. But make sure that you as a choleric, or you as working with a choleric, that they're not able to bring a result that is going to be damaging or detrimental to the person or to the group, because sometimes it will happen. A melancholy naturally wants to do things right, but never does know when it's exactly right. They're like, this is good, but what about this? Well, I think we need to do this, and I think we need to do that. They're quality oriented. Melancholies are not trying to be right. They are driven to figure out what's right. And they have a cautious, tentative response designed to reduce tension to an unfavorable environment. You know, melancholy sometimes sounds like a very pessimistic style of living, but I heard William Branham say one time that almost all the prophets were melancholy. Meaning they didn't really want to take the route they were taking, but they saw it as the only way that they could get their message across. And it was working on them, turmoil on the inside, at having to say things to the people that they really didn't want to say. So they have this in them. Melancholies know how to bring peace in an aggressive situation. They influence their environment by achieving to the existing rules. That's one of the strengths of a melancholy, is they will know the rules and the regulations, and they can bring them out left and right, but they don't know how to deal with someone who goes beyond the rules, breaks the rules, or is not even in the same ball field as the rules. They don't know how to deal with them a lot of times, and it worries them to death. They're conscientious, they're picky, can be sensitive to what others think of their work. They have anxiety about the present and the future. They tend to have guilt feelings, but fail to realize that guilt will not change the past, nor will worry change the future. So they're constantly in a worry and having a guilt feeling, which is exactly what the message brings until we stepped into love divine, and that is a guilt and a constant worry about where we were at. I feel guilty about this, I feel guilty about that. We were melancholy, and we've stepped into something different now. Melancholies are well organized. They may keep their things cluttered, but they will know what is in the piles. You ever see somebody like that at work? You're like, geez, look at this room. But you start talking to them, and you bring up a situation that happened 4 or 5 years ago, and could that be a precedent in this arbitration? Oh yeah, and they'll go straight to a pile and pull something out and throw it in front of you and say, here's what happened. This is the documentation of it. You think, Okay, they knew exactly where it was at 4 or 5 years later. Melancholies. They are determined to make the right and best decision, so they will continue to collect information and collect it, and may change their mind in the process 3 or 4 times. And then everybody says, I don't even want to listen to them. They said this, and then they said this, and then they said this. Well, I guarantee you, if you'll pay attention to the melancholy, the latest thing that they're saying is far beyond what they said over here. And probably, because they went through all the detail to figure it all out, is far beyond what you're thinking too. Melancholies. They fear taking risks. These are things that develop you. And you know, when I'm reading these things to you, you know if it's actually you. You can feel it. You know it. Your intuition tells you. Melancholies are skeptical about almost everything. But they are creative and capable people. They tend to get bored with something once they get it figured out. Starters. Remember that. Melancholies are good starters, but they are not good finishers. If you see somebody in your family that's a good starter, always come behind them and work with them and ask them if they're on a project, when are you supposed to be finished with that? Because they won't set a date. When are you going to make your decision on it? And try to get them to put a finish on something. Because if you don't, all their life, they'll start with it. There was a guy who worked on my house. I had him work on several things. He never finished one thing. I had to bring somebody in to finish the plumbing on the bathtub. I had to bring somebody in to finish the tile in the bathroom. I had to bring somebody else in to put the countertops in. I had to bring somebody. It was just, he started them all, but he didn't finish any of them. And that's what happens with melancholies. They are good starters, but then as it goes along, they get very bored. And I remember we were working, and one of his friends he brought with him, and my bathroom had the black paper up around it, the waterproof paper, and the ceramics hadn't got put up yet. And so I said to the brother, I said, when are we going to put the ceramics up? Because it had been that way a couple of weeks. And the guy he brought with him said, I just want you to know, my restroom's been black for 2 years. I kind of laughed and I thought, okay. So I got somebody to put it up for me because I knew it would be black for 2 years if I didn't. And so that's the kind of thing that a melancholy does. Doesn't make them a bad person. Doesn't mean they're horrible, but they just don't have the endurance to the end. Melancholies, on the other hand, can be very, very influential, and they can be very helpful to you if you pay attention to their detail. When they're bringing you things, pay attention to it. You know, you said this, but I found this. And a choleric will say, I know what I said and I meant it. Whereas if you'll use your head, that melancholy walked away from you knowing that you had not found the exact right answer. And that's why they went and dug in and spent 3 or 4 hours or a day to come back to you and say, you might want to rethink this. When a melancholy says that to you, you really might want to rethink it. Because they have taken the time to dig the details. Phlegmatics, and then we'll close. Naturally service oriented. They're not big leaders. But when somebody who is leading, and this is why I said we're all trying to in this move movement that we're in, everyone's saying we're all leaders, we're all apostles, we're all prophets, we're all teachers and pastors. The fivefold ministry's done away with, and I can go along with that in a sense, but I'm telling you, natures are natures, and there are some who are phlegmatics, and they will not be leaders. And you can sit until hell freezes over, and they will not lead. And that's just all there is to it. But they will be the very best second-hand person. They will be the very best person in the group to serve. I see that. Now let's do that. And they will be the very best at all those things, at making sure things happen after a leader has brought those things. Brother Branham said Moses was a leader. Everybody couldn't be leaders. Some had to follow Moses. It's the same way now. There's many people that are not leaders, and they are going to be followers, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just pay attention. Listen to the melancholy and the details. Pay attention to the sanguine. Do all those things, Mr. Phlegmatic, Mrs. Phlegmatic. Pay attention to what they're all saying. And as you're putting things into service, make sure that it is goal-oriented, or that the result is going to be a good result. Because the phleg is going to have more influence on the result than anyone in any of these characters. Because they are the service-oriented person. They're the ones that will put it into action. So we see this. They are passive, both favorable and unfavorable environments. They can just listen. They influence their environment by cooperating with others to carry out a task that has been identified. They're not identifiers. They're not any of those things. They're not leaders. They're not going to take the forefront. But they are going to be some of the best that there is at taking what's been said and believing it, knowing it, and putting it into action. Phlegmatics. They tend not to be highly ambitious. They tend to lack a sense of urgency, both due to their passive nature. Phlegmatics are introverted, calm, unemotional, easygoing, indecisive, little talk, patient, agreeable. They're both slow and indirect when responding to others. They don't want to hit the person between the eyes. They don't want that conflict. They're going to be very slow about how they say it, hoping that it'll keep you from rising in your anger or whatever 2 or 3 notches in front of them, because they don't want to feel that. Phlegmatics are that way. I always think of this coming to my mind again when I'm thinking of phlegmatics. You know, the wife is more of, a lot of times, of a sanguine in the family, or a melancholy. And so the husband and wife get married. And the husband, a lot of times, is a phleg. And so when they get married, you know, it's 2 or 3 years later, and the wife finally says to the husband, you know what, I hate to tell you this, but you never tell me you love me. You never do. And the husband said, honey, I told you I loved you when I married you. If I change my mind, I'll let you know. That's a phlegmatic. They're not going to say a lot, but the love, the expression, all those things are there. My dad was a total phlegmatic. And you had to have set a 40-acre woods on fire to get him to say something. I remember I did that. Accidental. I was out squirrel hunting, and I said I seen a hollow tree, and I seen a couple squirrels go up in it, and I thought, I'll get you guys out of there. So I took a bunch of leaves and I pushed them up in there, and I lit them. Oh man, that tree was just like a chimney. that fire started roaring out the top of that tree, and it was going all over the woods, and well, you know, it was a mess. I couldn't stop it. I ran home. I didn't tell anybody. The 40-acre field, or 40 acres of woods burned. And my father, 50 years later, was ready to pass. And I thought I would see if I could get a rise out of him. He was laying in the bed. He was an invalid. He could move his eyes and his head just a little bit. He could squeeze your hand, fingers and stuff. And I said, Dad, I said, you remember when we lived out on the old Biddle farm? He said, shook his head a little bit, was looking at me. I said, you remember that 40 acres of woods that burnt down? He just looked at me. I said, I'm going to tell you, I never told you, but I'm the one to burn it down. Him laying there in the bed, and his face just as red as a beet. He got so mad. It was like if he could have moved a hand or a leg, he would have then. But I told him that. But that flag, they're just so calm, and it takes an awful lot to get them to come out of that. You're better off not to try to make them come out, because when they come out, oh man, they come out. They will burn everything down around them. So let them be the phlegmatic. Let them be the server. Let them be, leave them alone. I've been in meetings and tried to push because of my training and everything. I tried to push to get people to talk, and made some of my worst enemies because people were so embarrassed to say anything. And finally they would come to me and say, Mr. Parnell, I am so tired of you trying to point me out and make me say things. I do not like to talk. I don't have to talk. I'm not one of those that are going to be doing the training. I'm not one of those that are going to be out here dealing with people, and leave me alone. I thought, wow, okay. So, and it was me. I was the one that was the problem, not them. That was their nature. And I was trying to buck and go against those things with them. So, in these cycles, we talked today about influences over these cycles. And we'll get into the zodiac a little bit and its influences. But you see family ties, you see the chemistry of your body, you see the temperaments that you build. And these things are all influences. When you feel something going on in these cycles and it doesn't feel good, go back to these three things. They are probably, one of them is influencing you and it's driving you in a wrong way. Whether it is something that happened in your family ties, something in the chemistry of your body, or something in these temperaments, and it could be something about the zodiac, which we'll get into. So influences on the cycles, that's what these things do for you. You can look them up, you can study them and find out so much more. There are books, there's a book called Please Understand Me by Kiersey and Bates. Myers-Briggs put it out. Just a great book to understand yourself. There is birthdays, numbers, and astrology, I think is the name of the book. I'll put it out and you guys can look at it. I'll put a picture of them on Facebook. Beautiful book, nice big thick book, and you can go through and figure yourself in that book. You can travel all the way through it and look at it. There is Linda Goodman's Sun Signs and Linda Goodman's Love Signs. Excellent books for you to be able to understand yourself. And when you're looking at these things, there's Tim LaHaye and his book on the temperaments. Just amazing. And in those books, all of these things about the chemistry is being built in. Carl Jung has some books about the bile and the chemistry of the body and things like that. And it just wakes you up to every little thing that you feel. It gives you more of an opportunity to be positive with people. It helps you to understand a person and where they're coming from and be able to adjust and love them the same as you would anybody, even though you're totally different. So I hope this has been a help to you. Your influences mean a lot. Is there anything that...
And no comments on the website, on the Facebook, no comments.
So I've done it again? I went so far out.
You silenced us all.
Amen. Okay. As we stand. All is well, all is well. We have heard our message, shalom, and all is well. There is a place of perfect rest inside the inner veil. So rest in life, rest, for all is well. We thank you for this day. We thank you for waking up this morning. We thank you for moving in our hearts. We thank you for giving us all of these things to understand ourselves with. In the authority of Christ, we stand here calling for the things that we need in this life and believing that they will come to pass always in Jesus' name.
Amen. So be it.
So be it.
And remember Daniel and Connie in your prayers.
Yes.
Denise and the boys.
Denise and the boys. Okay, remember Denise, your family, Gerald's family.